Well, good morning, everybody. This is Rick Wilson with Martin and Associates. Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm going to wait a few more seconds or a minute or so as more attendees become online, and then we'll get going in a minute. All right, looks like we got a number of people already logged in. So again, I'm Rick Wilson with Martin and Associates. We're going to be talking about the Sage 100 1099 processing today. There's been some changes for 2020, as some of you may know. So that's the main topics today. I'll be joined by my colleague, Brett Penzinger.
Hello.
And thanks, Brett. So let's go ahead and get started. The agenda for today is first going over the quick main change for the year. So we'll talk about that first. Go over some of the Sage 100 compatibility issues and requirements. And then, as maybe some of you guys have already seen, maybe from some emails from Sage, there is a utility that Sage has provided to move data around, because most of you have been tracking some key 1099 information under the miscellaneous form, which now has to be under the new NEC form. So Brett is going to go over that along with a demo of how it works. And then there are specific versions that this utility works with. So if you're not on those versions, we're going to talk a little bit about the alternatives at the end, and then have a Q&A. So we're planning to try to answer all the questions at the end. So we'll be going through this fairly quickly. So to cover, all of the requirements and go over how the utility works. And then there should be plenty of time for questions afterwards, and just use the chat as well. This is being recorded, so we'll send out the recording via email to everybody that attended after the webinar. So the main overview here is, so the 1099 miscellaneous form is no longer used to report non-employee compensation. So it is still a valid form, just not for non-employee compensation. Still holds rents and royalties, and I think legal fees and things like that. There is a box 7, which is where non-employee compensation used to be kept, but it's not for that purpose anymore. So the 1099 NEC is now what you use to report non-employee compensation. And that form was actually used a long time ago, back in the early 1980s, so it's being revived. So box 1 reports what used to be, reported in box 7. So essentially that's what the utility that we're going to talk more about is doing when we run it on your system. So, and the main reason for this change, as my understanding, is to align some of the due dates more appropriately. So I've got a chart here coming up on what some of the due dates are and the changes there. So just a quick, to put a visual to what's new. So box 7, as you can see, is no longer used to hold dollar amounts, which is where the non-employee compensation used to be. But as you can see here, 1099 is still there to report a bunch of other types of payments. And then the new 10 NEC is, its sole purpose is to report on non-employee compensation. So you're really only going to have amounts, at least from Sage, in box number 1. If there was withholdings and things like that, Sage really doesn't track that anyway, even though you could type that in manually. But box 1 is where the actual payment amounts to vendors would be. And then finally, before I hand this over to Brett, so here's a quick chart on some of the due dates here. So one of the key things that you can see here is this new NEC form really needs to be done by the end of January. It turns out that January 31st is on a weekend, so the due date is February 1st. But as you can see, it's the same filing date for recipients as it is for filing with the IRS, and it doesn't matter whether you're filing manually with paper or e-filing. And you can see the difference with the 1099 miscellaneous form. So that's it on, I guess, some of the big picture reason why we're talking here today. And I'll stop sharing, Brett, and hand this over to you. All right.
So picking up here on what version of Sage is going to be compatible. This was in the original email. There's going to be additional emails just to sort of make sure this is crystal clear and we're clear in our communication with you on what works, what doesn't work, and what what the alternatives are. So the versions of Sage that are compatible with NEC are 2018, 2019, and 2020. Now, within each version, there's different product updates or service pack levels. So really, if you're on any version of 2020, you're able to use the NEC changes. So both the initial version of 2020 and its first product update are both compatible. The 2019 version, it's update 3 or update 4. And 2018 is update 9 and update 10. So what that means is if you're on one of those versions but you're not on that update level, there is what is called a product update that you have to run. I'll talk about that briefly on the next slide as well. What this gives you is it does some accounts payable screen changes so that you have the drop down box for NEC, and you can pick the default box of box 1 now. It does give you a separate 1099 payment category that is the NEC. The NEC category, as well as it does have an update, a utility update that's going to move data from your MEC box 7 bucket to your NEC box 1 bucket, and I'll talk about that, and I'm going to show you that as well. So these are the compatible versions. Again, at the very end, we're going to talk about what we're going to do for the incompatible versions. But to get you, for everyone basically that's on this call, the assumption is you're probably not ready to hit the 1099 buttons to produce an NEC form. The steps that you have to go through to get from where you are today to basically where you can actually file the 1099s. The first one is what I just mentioned, your product update level. You have to get on a be on a compatible version / product update. That was the last slide. And all these steps, I should mention, all these steps that I'm going to talk about, it's possible that end users can go through it. There's steps, there's instructions, manuals on how to do those. But staff at Martin Associates is available to help with any of these steps. Just call your account rep or whoever it is that you typically talk to at our office, and we'll get you scheduled. The steps that I'm going to be detailing here typically take about 30 minutes, and it does require people to be out of the system. So it's either a scheduled interruption or an after hours task. So the very first thing is the product update level. If you're on 2018, 2019, or 2020, we could schedule to get that product update installed. Typically, that can get installed without any issue. If you're on one of those versions, you can just install the update. If you do have a lot of third parties or enhancements, you're going to want to check with us first just to make sure that there's not any extra steps that you have to do. Generally, you're fine, but if you do know you do use third parties or enhancements, it's always good to check with us first. The second step is, although the product update did give us the NEC changes, there was a patch to this utility that picked up your miscellaneous box 7 data and moved it into NEC box 1. So in addition to getting on the right product update level, there is also an update to the utility that moves data around. And I'll show you the process of what that utility does. So the next step is to actually run that utility. That utility, it does have to be run for each company. The utility that does move the data around, it only takes a couple seconds, maybe a minute, but you do have to do it for each company that's going to report 1099s. The basic steps that you'll see me do here in just a second is opening up the file run menu, typing in syscon, which is sort of like the command line utility that Sage offers. Type in this command that you see on the screen. It's going to present you with a couple prompts that you'll see here in a minute. And at the very end, it's going to produce a log file of basically whatever it's changed. At that point in time, you're fine. Everything, it's going to report what it moved. You can review that, and then you can go into the Atrix software and start producing any of your 1099 forms. So as soon as you've run the utility, you're basically fine. You're basically fine to move forward. With that said, I'm going to jump into the demo here. So what I'm in right now, I'm in a 2019 version update 4. I have installed the update.
Hey,
Yes.
Brett, could you show an example of going to the help and saying about so people can...
Yeah, so if you go into help, if you go over to the side here on the Sage 100, you're going to see the version written out, and then it's going to have, so this 2019 is basically 6.10. I'm on update 4, this dot 4 here. If you're concerned on what version you are, or you have any questions on that, you take a screenshot of this or just type this out and email this to us, whoever it is that you typically deal with Martin Associates. We're happy to take a look at that or log in with you to review this to let you know if you have to get up to the valid product update level or not.
Thanks, Brett.
Yeah. So at this point, I'm in a system that I have. I've got the valid product update, and I went out and I downloaded the. Update utility and installed that as well. Those two things do require everyone to be out of the system. So that is, again, that's something that it's a scheduled interruption or it's an after hours task. So before I run the utility, which I'm going to do here in just a minute, I'm going to open up vendor maintenance. I've just set a couple various vendors to miscellaneous 7. And if I also look at my year 2020, I've put some data into my box 7. So I've got Airway, I've got All Climate, and there's a few others that I've set up. So at this point, it would be very similar to how any of your non-employee Misc 7s would be, is at this point in the basic life cycle of the update. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say file run. I'm going to go into this syscon, which is again is this sort of command line utility. You can either type, I'm going to paste it. Make sure I've got some valid formatting here. And
Yeah, you got to use your insert key when you're
Yeah, I
entering
do.
that.
So I'll just type it in by hand. Utility / AP / update 1099s UTL. So what this is going to do, the very first thing that it says is this utility is meant to only be run once. This is not something that you're going to ever really have to run year in and year out. It's a one-time move of miscellaneous box 7 over to NEC1. Basically, after you run this, if you're going to set up any new NEC vendors, you're going to want to do that as NEC box 1. You're not going to want to set them up as miscellaneous box 7 and then try to rerun this. That's not the intention of this. This is really intended to do a one-time update. It's going to tell me that I'm going to run it. I'm going to run it for my current company. The company that I had set up is just a 99T for 1099 test. It will let you know if you do try to run this twice. It's going to yell at you. It's saying, "Hey, FYI, you're attempting to do this again. Are you sure?"
Yeah. So in general, people shouldn't be seeing that.
Right. If you
yeah.
do see a message that says that you've already run this, you would want to stop. And call us or double check what company you're in, that type of thing. So it's saying that in the home text out, it made this file. So if I go to this same directory, if I go to my home text out, I ran a test one yesterday. This is the one from today. Let me actually close this screen. And what it's going to say is that it moved airway, it moved all climate, and it looks like IBM was another one that I had set up. So it's going to move both any of your 1099 boxes as well as your 1099 defaults on your vendor maintenance. So what that's going to look like now is if I go into accounts payable vendor maintenance, where before this was an MEC7, it's now an NEC1. If I go to my 1099 history, my year 2020, it's moved that box 7 into box 1. I should also mention the utility, it's going to move both your 2020 data and your 2021 data. That's one of the reasons why they came out with an update fix, because I think the original one was only moving 2020 data. So if you've done a couple weeks worth of 1099 payments, those will get picked up and those will get also moved in your 2021 boxes as well. So it's not like you have to do this again for 2021. The idea is it's going to move both 2020, 2021 data, and you're fine to just to use the system as is. You really shouldn't have to interact with this type of utility again in the future. So that's the process if we are on a supported version. So again, just going back to this slide, getting on a valid product update level, installing the update NEC utility, running that utility, and then just reviewing the log. Actually, I do want to show one more thing before I close out of the demo here. I did want to go into when you do run your integrated Atrix Form 1099 tax reporting, it does also drop in the NEC form type. So just like your interest, dividend, and miscellaneous were separate runs, there's now 4 instead of 3. So again, it's make sure you're on a valid product update level, install the updated utility, run that utility, and then review the log just to make sure everything is accurate. Um, that's for the folks that were on a supported version. So what does it mean if you're on 2017 or earlier? Your options really are update to 2018, 2019, or what would really be, we would put you on 2020. If that is something that you'd want to do, you would want to contact your account manager as soon as possible, so that you could get on a list and you could make sure that we could fit you in with the year-end schedule. So that's the first thing, is to just completely upgrade the Sage to a valid version. Another option is if you have a smaller number of 1099s with the paper bundles that you can get at like Staples. A lot of them will come with software like an Adams Forms. It has there's bundles that has software included with that you just simply type in your 1099. So you could run reports. We could help you show you which reports would kind of report what your 1099 payments were. For the year, so you could take that data and just manually fill that in. That works well if you've got like a manageable amount of 1099s that you're capable of just rekeying that data in. The last recommendation that we have is actually still using Atrix, but Atrix has a standalone version that you can download from their website, install, and it's got an importer. So what we're working on, and we should have finished by early next week, is a compatible version of an export file that's compatible with this Atrix import, so that you could run through an import process. Everything's mapped for you, and then you're still going through the same Atrix process. You're just going through it with the Atrix standalone versus the Atrix that is integrated with your 1099 printing out of Sage that automatically feeds data. So it's an export and then import process into Atrix versus just hitting the button and it happens before you in the background. I do want to mention, if you're worried about your interest, dividend, or your miscellaneous 1099 filing, those will still work with the integrated Atrix that exists today. So if you're running one of those, if you're worried about those 1099 forms, those are still compatible. It will still move that data and it will still populate in Atrix. We've tried 2016, we've tried 2017. Certainly, if that's your plan, look at it sooner than later, just to make sure it's going to work for you. We've tested a couple systems; it worked well for us. But certainly I wouldn't wait to the last minute if that's your plan with the other form types. But those other form types do appear to work just fine in previous versions. It's really only the NEC form that there's no communication for in the background. So you do have to do something special. So we provided we can help you with an export utility, show you how to import that, and then you can go through the same Atrix process that you're going through with Sage. It's just an Atrix standalone. I should mention that where you have a print, where you can print everything option out of Atrix with the integrated matrix that happens when you click buttons in Sage, the standalone version only accepts the complete paperless bundle, which means they print the forms, they put forms in envelopes, they mail the forms, they do the red copy, and they e-file. So it's the complete bundle. That's the only bundle that is supported with the standalone. The price is $1.99 per form. It is $25 minimum. As you go through the process, it does show you what the cost is going to be before you actually, just like your Atrix process out of Sage does today. Before you pick, I want to print them versus I want to e-file them, you have the ability to look at the price to see how much that's going to cost. It's the same deal with the standalone. You've got, but the only option is that you have to do the complete bundle. So it will show you what the price is. So it's $1.99 per form, $25 minimum, and and Martin Associates can certainly assist. The assumption, if you're on unsupported version, we're almost going to have to help you with this last option, which is the standalone version of Atrix. I should also mention one other item I didn't put on this list is a lot of our clients just are using their accounting firms to they'll send a report. We can show you which report that would be if that's a service that they provide. So in a lot of cases, a lot of our clients are just using their accounting firm to send them data and they file for them. So that's another option. I didn't include that in the list, but I guess that's a realistic option as well. I think that is all that I had prepared to talk about unsupported versions. I think, Rick, we're ready for any questions that have popped up.
Yep. Yeah, so a couple have come up. One question was, does the utility work if we have split setup? And so what that means is, for this person, was new vendors, some vendors that were added in 2020 were set up with the using the 1099 NEC form, because depending on their version and their product update, that was actually, using 1099 NEC was available, somewhere in the middle of 2020 to be able to set up your vendors that way. So the question is what if I did that for some vendors, but then other vendors were using the 1099 miscellaneous? So I already answered that question to the person, saying that it will account for that, because the utility is specifically, looking at 1099 miscellaneous box 7 and switching it. So if you had a vendor that already had it NEC, then there's nothing to transfer. And then the other question was, if I complete the update for the NEC, will I be able to still complete 1099 miscellaneous like rent in the same company? And so the answer to this is yes, because again, it's only going to move box 7 information that's on a 1099. So even if you had the same vendor in the same company that maybe had both rent and and the non-employee compensation, right, it would still leave the rent there on the 1099 miscellaneous, and you'd be fine. So
yeah, I should say that, especially I'm still kind of doing this for anyone that just kind of wants to see how that's going to look. They're a little tentative about running the utility. That's understandable. We can create like a test company and then run it in the test company. I did it last night for someone to make sure that it looks good. They're going to review it, and then we'll run it live probably early next week. So that's an option as well. If you're concerned, you think you have some special case scenarios, we can always run that in a test company for you, and then you can look at it. You can even start the 1099 process, do the test drive, and see what the forms are going to look like even.
Right. Don't really have any other item here. I mean, one thing is, and I think we've mentioned this, once we run the utility and, or you're on the correct version, we run the utility, it transfers the data, you're basically using the same, 1099 reporting process, through Atrix, where, it brings that in, you go through the wizard and it brings the information into that Atrix grid, and then you go through all the questions. That's all going to be the same. It's just that you've got another form to pick, between. So, but I don't have anything else that has come up here. So,
yeah, I would say the only sort of closing statement is a lot of these steps. It's kind of assumed that Martin Associates would be there to install updates, install patches, things like that. Just contact your account manager. We're prepared. Our schedules are open. We understand that this is a thing that has to happen. We're ready to do this. Reach out sooner than later to your account manager, and we'll get you scheduled.
All right. I think that's it. So as I mentioned earlier, we'll be sending a follow-up email. There'll be a recording, and if you want to revisit some of this info. So I think that's it. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks everybody for your time, and let us know if you need any help. Have a good day.